Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Issues and Attitudes. My name is Jeff Owens, Interim General Manager at WEIU. On the phone is Illinois State Senator Mr. Dale Ryder. Welcome, Dale.
Hey, Jeff. How are you this morning?
I'm not too bad at all for a Monday with everything going on. Appreciate you taking a little time and wanting to talk to our listeners and viewers.
You bet. Happy to do it.
Okay, I guess I always ask when somebody comes on, has anything happened in the last couple of hours? Just for the fact that this is such an absolutely wild time we're experiencing. And I don't mean to make fun of it, but it's one of those things that it seems like every 2 hours something new comes out, Dale.
Right, and not really this morning. You know, the pattern that we've kind of fallen into, Jeff, here is that everyone. And myself, and I'm talking about like elected officials and people like that, we all kind of hold our breaths until the afternoon briefings. So we get the afternoon briefing from the governor, typically at 2:30, followed by the coronavirus task force on the federal level, which usually briefs later in the afternoon or in the early evening. That's where we get the official numbers. We may, from time to time, be on other calls, whether it's like with the Department of Public Health or the Department of Emergency Management Services or whoever from time to time. But mostly that's it. And then in the afternoon is when we learn more about what's developed, usually overnight and in the early morning hours.
One of the things that was going around this morning, and that's part of the reason I asked, there was a rumor that Governor J.B. Pritzker was going to ban alcohol sales in Illinois, and it was all over social media. I was getting texts, but it seems to be fake news. Can you verify that this is not something you've heard, or any comment on it, I guess?
I can verify that I've not heard anything about that. I can also suggest, I think that's highly unlikely, if for no other reason than typically this governor's pattern has been that if he's going to invoke some kind of ban through his executive order powers, he usually announces it at least the day before, if not earlier than that. And I just don't see what has changed in the situation. While the situation is fluid, there's a part of it's pretty consistent. I mean, every day we're watching the numbers go up. We see the number of counties which have at least one positive case of COVID-19 slowly increase. But there's nothing that's been so abrupt or disruptive, I think, so as to warrant the governor doing something like that. So I would suspect that that's one of those good old social media Facebook groups.
Yeah, and I've looked for like the last hour and a half. There's nothing on it other than people texting and posting on social media. So that's untrue. Well, let's talk a little bit about, as a state senator here in Central Illinois, what are your duties now when we're under this pandemic, and how has your kind of job changed over the last a week to 15 days?
Really, we're still engaged in constituent service. It's just that constituents are mostly calling about different things now, and it's mostly centered, obviously, on the coronavirus pandemic. Lots of calls from business owners about whether they qualify as an essential business. That was particularly early on when the governor issued his stay-in-shelter order on, I think it was the 21st or 22nd of March. So lots of calls about that early on, still fielding some calls about that. Occasional calls from employees who work in those businesses or whose businesses have been closed. And they're calling about the essential business issue. They're calling about unemployment. Lots of calls about the federal stimulus package that passed Washington and was signed into law yesterday or the day before. I mean, $2.2 trillion, that's a lot of money, a lot of things in there. We're still sorting through the details of what's going to be in there.
Let's start locally with the essential. There's been a lot of talk about, people that seem like the people that are essential want to be non-essential, and the non-essentials want to be essentials. I kind of post that, but it's funny. It's really true, but there's a lot of variables in this essential stuff, and I guess could you explain what you believe is the rationale behind how somebody becomes essential or non-essential, and really what it means to the people in our area here in district, in the 55th district?
Well, of course, I mean, it all originates from the governor's executive order, and just for a very, very brief civics lesson, if you will. So state law gives the governor the ability to issue a disaster declaration. That disaster declaration can be for part of the state or the entire state. The governor has issued that disaster declaration in this instance for the entire state of Illinois. Once he does that, that gives him broad authority to issue executive orders, and I think the governor has issued between 15 and 20 executive orders on a whole host of issues. The ones that get the most attention are obviously what's called the stay in shelter order, which basically says people are required to stay in their own homes unless they have to engage in essential travel. One of the reasons for essential travel is to go to work for an essential business. The essential businesses fit into several broad categories: education, certain essential manufacturing. For example, if you work for a business that manufactures goods that are utilized by a hospital, you're in an essential business. If you are engaged in printing of textbooks or the manufacture of laptops, you're in an essential business. So the categories, Jeff, are pretty broad. I would say that there are as many or more businesses that qualify as essential businesses as those that do not. Now, the reason it doesn't look like that is because your bars and restaurants are closed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that is a very noticeable thing as we go around town. But the essential business categories are very broad. I would say that of the calls I've gotten into the district office asking questions, 2/3 to 3/4 of those do qualify in one way or another as an essential business.
Okay. The shelter in place, do you think people are following it like they should? I know in some of the bigger cities they're not, but it seems like in Coles County they're doing a little bit better, but that's all what I can speak of. Do you think it's working?
I think that it is taken seriously. Now, I'm a little parochial. I'm from Coles County. I'm from the 55th District. But for the travel that I have done, you can tell there's a difference. That people are being respectful of the spirit of the stay in shelter order. I don't think people have cut down. I mean, people are out. They're going to work. They're going to the grocery store. They may be going over to check on a friend's house. They may be getting outside to exercise. All those things are permitted under the executive orders. There have been problems in other parts of the state, most notably in the city of Chicago. And now, I think 3 or 4 days ago, the mayor in the city of Chicago closed the lakefront, closed the public parks, which are open here in our area. The playground equipment is sequestered off.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
But the parks themselves are open. But the mayor had to close them down because people were congregating. And now I've seen some video of Chicago Police Department officials actually approaching groups of people and telling them to break it up. So, and that's unfortunate because as you watch the numbers go up, the hot spot in this state obviously is the city of Chicago and suburban Cook County. Those two areas. So Cook County comprises 75 to 80% of the statewide cases right now. So, and I know the governor and the mayor are very concerned that if they don't get that under control, there's the potential that Chicago could ramp up and look more like New York City, where obviously is the worst place in the nation as far as what's going on.
Yeah, and it's even, I saw where is it Governor Cuomo today, or Mayor Cuomo, I always forget, was actually going to impose a $500 fine if people were not sheltering in place, just to try to keep people off the streets of New York. So,
absolutely. I mean, it's Governor Cuomo, and the mayor of New York is Mayor de Blasio.
Thank you. That's what I knew you'd know.
Right. Well, yeah, at least I know that, right? So, and I mean, last night there was on 60 Minutes. The first segment on 60 Minutes was actually a focus on what's going on in New York City, and specifically in New York City hospitals. And when that segment is over, I mean, your first reaction is to pray that you never see anything like that close by here, because they are in a dire situation there.
Speaking of the numbers are increasing here in Illinois a little bit, not as bad as some of the other places. A lot of people have been talking about that April is the key month. If we shelter in place, follow the rules, that we could see, and I don't even like this term, but a flattening of the curve or a downside of the numbers. Your thoughts, if do you believe that's the case?
Well, I mean, I'm listening to the public health experts just like you are, Jeff. I mean, I'm not trained in that area, and so we are, and now there are varying opinions, but I would say that most agree that sometime in the second or third week of April is kind of that's when you anticipate you'll see that peak. Now, That's what the peak looks like in terms of raw numbers is going to be different everywhere you go in Illinois. It's going to be different across the nation, and that based on that is why I expect the governor will probably extend his disaster declaration beyond April 7th. Now, for another whole entire 30 days, we don't know that. That would take us, obviously, into early May. And the next question is, assuming he does extend the disaster declaration, do all the executive orders also get continued? In other words, will he issue a new set of executive orders that look like the set that are in place right now under the existing disaster declaration? Again, I mean, if I was betting, I would say that's probably going to be the case.
Okay, let's talk about Illinois right now. Income tax extension. I know you're a big proponent of that, so people now don't have to worry about the April 15th deadline, correct?
Correct. So President Trump, the federal government, early on issued a 90-day delay in the filing and payment deadline. We had to work a little bit on the chief executive here in Illinois to get him to follow the president's lead. He doesn't like doing that, and but he eventually relented to that, and I'm glad. I mean, it would have made zero sense whatsoever to require, for purposes of state taxes, a deadline of April 15 and federal taxes July 15. Now, that will come at a cost, though. I mean, there will be a delay then in a big, obviously, cash flow that you get around April. The state gets a lot of money in April and a little bit before and a little bit after. And so a lot of the spending that goes on in the state is kind of triggered toward the realization that that's when you get that money. We will have to deal with that. And at some point, I'm sure you and I are going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Springfield or what's not going on in Springfield and what has to happen in Springfield. And one of the issues is we're going to have to deal with the cash flow ramifications of pushing back the payment deadline 90 days.
Yeah, I want to talk about the budget. I got a couple other things real quickly about the driver's license facilities being closed. I know has caught a little flack. What were your thoughts on that? I mean, not just the kids who are 16. I don't care about that, but I mean, people have to renew their license and if that, all that stuff. So that was a kind of an odd one in my opinion. What was your thinking?
Well, I mean, you're right. It does. I mean, if you think about different state government offices or entities, the one that probably sees the most traffic are the driver's license facilities that are under the control of Secretary of State Jesse White. And I understand it's created a convenience, but in terms of just flow of people, I mean, if the whole notion of the stay in shelter and essential business executive orders is for people to stay home and keep low traffic in centralized areas, well, you'd have to look at that office and say, okay, that's a problem. So for the people who are pushing up against deadlines, I mean, they'll be accommodated. They absolutely will be accommodated. It absolutely is. It's an inconvenience. I mean, I remember when both of my boys turned 16, if you'd have told them that they weren't going to get their driver's license, I mean, it wouldn't have mattered if it was the plague or the Black Death out there. They'd have been unhappy with that, and I get that. But that's just a sign of the times, and we've got to deal with it, at least on the short term. Schools in Illinois, I know right now the Act of God days go through March 31st. April 1st, schools are going to have a new system in place, it appears. What are your thoughts on if we're going to keep our kids home, not keep our kids, or send them back to school, or where we're going with this in terms of schooling for the rest of this semester? Well, I mean, again, I think we'll know a lot more about this in the next few days about what's going to happen with the rest of the school year. But given the fact that a lot of time and effort is being put into quickly ramping up remote learning, the ability to communicate with students electronically and at least assign some schoolwork and get some things done for the remainder of the school year, it's difficult for me to believe that we're suddenly going to reverse course and we're going to send the kids back into the school buildings, particularly if you get to a point, Jeff, where you get to the end of April and there's two or three weeks left in the school year anyway, and you feel like you finally are on the downside of this slope. I mean, would it be smart to risk that progress by sending several hundred kids back into a school building? I'm not sure it would be, and I'm sure that's part of the conversation that's going on in the governor's office, and there'll be a broader conversation about that sooner. But I think that we should be of the mindset that remote learning is probably going to need to carry us through the rest of the school year.
Okay, that's what I was thinking as well, and I think most people are. They just don't like to talk about it.
No, they don't. No, none of this. I mean, as you know, I'm a assistant cross country coach and track coach, and if we do that, then the question is, what happens to the rest of the spring sports season?
Yeah, I think it's going to get wiped out. Unfortunately, I've got the same situation. I got a baseball player who's itching to play, but
and it's really unfortunate for some of those high, and I know this shouldn't be the central focus, but it is something that we need to recognize that's a casualty, if you will.
No,
and that is
yeah.
seniors in high school who, to one degree or another, how they performed in their spring sports season would depend on how much they're going to pay for college, or if they go to college at all.
Yeah, scholarships, half scholarships,
exactly.
and things like that, and just the fact that they're into their high school career would be, sitting at home, on a laptop trying to take finals, not being able to, do. There's others, not just sports. There's other activities kids do as well. It's a shame. I've said it a while, but I don't mean to be mean about it. I'm glad I don't have a senior this year because I just don't know what I would be thinking right now.
Right.
Now, with all this going on, we still have about 12 minutes left here when we're talking to Illinois State Senator Mr. Dale Ryder. How is this going to affect the Illinois budget and as we move forward? I know you're in your last term, not running for re-election, going to kind of quote-unquote retire. Not really, though, right? Talk about the effect on the Illinois budget that all this is going to have effect when you guys are trying to, you'll start. It's almost time to be thinking about budgets, and now we're in the middle of this pandemic.
Right, and there have been a couple conference calls, including legislators who are budget negotiaters, of which I am one, for the Senate Republicans. But they've really not been terribly informative thus far, and that's because there are a number of variables out there. First, the federal stimulus package. Obviously, there's money that is coming out of Washington that is flowing to the states, and it's in several broad categories. Well, how much of that is Illinois going to get? There's one variable. Two, what's happened to our economy? Well, we know the diminished economic activity is going to adversely affect revenues that come into the state of Illinois, which obviously that's the money that you use to pay for things. So three, there's obviously an increased degree of spending going on right now. I mean, most of the public entities and public employees continue to be paid, and although some offices are closed, they're working from home. So you've got your baseline expenses continue to go on. You add to that the money that the extra money that we are spending, and so your expenditures have gone up. So there's three variables right there. The fourth is a timeline, Jeff, and that is we don't know when we're going back to session. We're not allowed to do remote legislating. That's unconstitutional. The public has to have access to what it is we're doing. So at some point, I believe lawmakers are going to have to go back into the Capitol. Now, what does that look like? Is that 59 senators and another 100 staff people like it would normally be on the Senate floor during session? Well, it's not going to look like that, I don't believe. I think that there's going to be restricted access probably to the Senate floor, maybe even to the degree that you'll only have a few senators on the floor at a time. So rather than a vote being held and all 59 senators being on the floor pushing their buttons within 10 or 15 seconds of one another, it may be when a vote is to be held, the roll call is held open for 30 minutes. And
shuffle them in and out
on the floor 5 or 6 at a time and vote and then leave the chamber. I don't know. That's one of the scenarios that's been talked about. All of those, we've never faced anything like this before. So all of those are variables. Suffice to say that when we get to May or June, our budget is going to be in much worse shape than it looked like it was going to be in January or February.
Well, With all this going on and this being your last term, I think were you hoping maybe to kind of go out with just a nice, last few months of my job, and now you really have to go out. You're going to be working till, the last day you're in office with what the pandemic and the budget and everything that's going on.
Well, let's look at it this way. My constituents are going to get their dollars worth from me at least this year, right? Because I agree with you. There are some people say, well, you're going to have to go back. We're going to have to go back relatively soon. We have a new hospital funding plan that has to be passed, the assessment plan. We have to adopt a budget, obviously, and you want to do that before the end of May to provide some predictability for all those entities that depend upon state taxpayer dollars for their operation.
Mainly Eastern.
That's exactly right, number one. But also, remember, there are 2,000 to 3,000 pieces of legislation that are acted on by each chamber during the course of a spring session. And about 600 or so of those usually get passed on to the governor's office before the end of May for his action. Well, that's not all going to happen before the end of May now. I believe there will be some pieces of legislation that will pass before the end of May. That'll be a greatly reduced number. So I would suspect that we're looking at a summer or fall schedule to go back and do those other things. Now, hopefully not all those things, because, quite frankly, a number of the things that we act on in Springfield, quite frankly, don't need to be done. But I believe there will be session time later in the year to address more of those issues.
I know in the stimulus plan there's a small business portion of that hopefully provides small businesses some, a little bit of money or some, something that will get them through the next month, 2 months, however this thing goes. Do you know, is it been launched yet? And do you know much about it right now so people can start to work on it?
Not that much about it now. I would direct my constituents who are interested in that to the state's Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity website. There's lots of good information on there, including what information is available from the SBA. There will be low-interest loans involved. There will be some grants, but I think most of the assistance is going to be in the form of low-interest loans. This is going to be difficult. And we're going to, we will learn a lot more in the next 2 to 3 weeks about the details of those programs. But we don't have any choice but to make those available, because you've got particularly restaurants and bars, lots of entities out there who are going to need some cash up front to get their businesses up and started again, because they're experiencing no cash flow right now. They're going to have to. It's almost like they'll be starting over.
In your district, are you in daily communication with some of the all of the district's mayors or city leaders? How are you coordinating your efforts to kind of talk to all the city leaders in the district that you cover, Dale?
I regularly talk to mayors and county board members in my district. A group of officials that I am in regular contact with now, because of the particular nature of what's going on, are hospital officials.
Yeah.
Just calling around, checking to see how's it going there at your place. Do you need anything from me? What are you seeing? Just things like that help me keep a feel for what's going on in my district. But my job is always phone intensive. But it's never been more phone intensive than it has been in the last 2 to 3 weeks, though. And that's important, just so that I have a feel not only from the statewide perspective, from my district's perspective of what we're seeing here, as opposed to what the other parts of the state may be experiencing.
Do they ask you the similar questions, or do you get a variety, or is there something that just stands out that they all want to know?
You mean from my locals?
Yeah, almost anybody that you talk to. Is there? Everybody wants to know, like, when's this going to stop? The obvious question, but is there something else that they're asking you all the time that you didn't really think was coming?
Mostly, what do I? No, not. Most of them, they want to know. Okay, what are you hearing from other parts of the state, and when do you think things will return back to normal? I think that's the $64,000 question: is when do you think things will return back to normal? And I cite what you and I have already talked about, and that is I think the consensus or near consensus among the public health experts is that April is going to be a difficult month.
Yeah, I think.
And that perhaps May is when you can begin, and that's important. Begin to see perhaps a return to normalcy. But a lot of that depends on what happens in April.
There you go. We have a couple minutes left here with Dale Ryder. Dale, is there anything that you wanted to talk about? Being on, I appreciate you coming on this Monday. Anything that we've not got to?
Jeff, you know what? Nothing can replace the importance of your personal responsibility and your personal conduct in this. No number of disaster declarations or emergency orders can fix this. It's going to be us as individuals taking care of ourselves, which means an enhanced degree of attention to the little things: washing your hands, keeping your hands out of face, keeping yourself healthy, and checking in on your neighbors and your family members. I mean, that is what will defeat this and get us back to a degree of normalcy sooner than anything the government can do, is being personally responsible and putting others before yourselves. And if there's a message that I really want to put out there to your listeners, it's that, people, even politicians, you see them criticizing one another, and I have trouble even listening to that because
I haven't noticed.
There was not a time for that. Yeah. Now is the time not for that. People need to be taking care of themselves, paying attention to what they're doing, and putting their family members and their neighbors and their loved ones ahead of them. If everyone does that, we're going to be just fine.
Okay. The one thing that you hit nail on the head with people griping and blaming the Republicans, blaming the Democrats, Pritzker, they blame everybody, Trump and everybody. But one of the things that seems to be that doesn't get enough attention, in my opinion, is that the manufacturing companies that make the ventilators, the gloves and gowns, where are they at? Why are they not being questioned? Why they're not ramping up, production to get this stuff to the people in the hospitals?
Well, I think that is happening. I mean,
okay.
But Jeff, and then I guess I want to speak to that for a second, because the governor's been critical of the president. The president's been critical of everybody, but look. No one was expecting this. No one was expecting this. No one was expecting to have to ramp up the production of ventilators by a factor of 5 or a factor of 10, or manufacture a bunch of tests for something we didn't even know what it was early in the year. I mean, all this is new, and there's going to be wrinkles and there are going to be delays, and I think we just need to recognize that. The time for grading people can come in June or July or August or whatnot. But I think for now, everyone needs to recognize that everything that we're being expected to do here is new for this generation of Americans. And let's just recognize that and be patient and recognize there are going to be bumps along the way. And then when the dust settles, then we all look back and decide whether you get an A and you get a B and you get a D.
Okay. We're about out of time, Dale. If anybody needs to get in contact with your office, what's the best way to do that? We have about 30 seconds left, Dale.
My district office, I'm in here every day, 1-888-235-6033. Email drighter, D-R-I-G-H-T-E-R, at consolidated.net. We're doing our best to keep up with the calls and emails and respond accordingly. I
appreciate you coming in and wanting to be on and talking to the WEIU TV and radio listeners, Dale, and viewers. Appreciate it so much, and we'll be in touch soon. We may have you back on soon. And again, thank you for wanting to be on today. We appreciate it, Dale.
You bet, Jeff. Anytime. Have a good day.
This is WEIU. Everybody have a great day.